Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. My name is Chris Rainey, co-founder here at HR Leaders, and I'll be your host for today's live panel discussion where we're going to be talking about how to empower our mid-level managers and the strategies for balancing individual, team, and organizational needs. As always, before we jump into the discussion, for those of you that are new, let me give you a very quick tour of the platform. On the right-hand side, you'll be able to see the live chat. So take a second now, let everyone know who you are, where you're tuning in from around the world. Drop a link to your LinkedIn while you're there. Make sure you connect with each other. Also, make sure you hit the green follow button on the top right-hand side, and you'll be emailed a copy of the on-demand recording so you don't miss out as well, and also for the future events. So with that being said, let me introduce you to our amazing panelists. Firstly, we've got Lee Andrews, who's the Vice President and Global Head of Talent Acquisition and Executive Search at Halion. We've got Connie Fulton, who's a Senior Director of People Analytics at Eli Lilly and Company. Maddie Walton, who's a Senior Manager of Talent for Indoor, Home, and Jewelry Brands at Fiskars Group. Emily Killam, who's the Senior Director of People Analytics at Perceptics. And last but certainly not least, we've got Jennifer Christian, who is the Director of Corporate Learning at Farmers Insurance. Jennifer, I said I was going to pick on you first backstage, so I'm going to come to you if that's all right. How are you supporting mid-level managers in aligning their management practices with the organizational's goals?
So what I would say is it really starts with alignment at the top. And you need a clear strategy and then expected behaviors that support the strategy. So I've been at Farmers for about 20 years now, and traditionally we've worked a lot in silos, I would say. Last year we have a new CEO, and one of the first things that he did was grab a cross-functional team of about 60 employees, and they represented all levels of employees. They also represented all aspects of the business. He pulled that group together and they set about creating our strategy as a group. What that did was, one, it created a very clear strategy that was aligned across all levels and all different business units. But it also created natural champions within the business units so that way they could help communicate what the strategy was and then also bring that strategy to life. Um, in addition, the other big thing that we started to do this year, so that was a lot of the work last year, creating the strategy. This year, we really got aligned on performance expectations. And that, again, it started at the top. This was the first time I think our executive committee came together as they're reviewing, the annual performance. They actually sat down and reviewed together what does good look like for their executives, their direct reports. And then that really started to trickle down across the organization as we, again, as we got greater alignment. The other big thing that we did this year is we really started to agree on what's expected of farmers, people leaders. Again, in years past, we've had like many little companies within farmers operating under their own expectations. This is the first time where I could actually describe to you what does it mean to be a leader at Farmers, and I know exactly what those behaviors are, and every people leader should know that as well, because it's been trickled down, it's being lived, and we're creating development that also supports that. So we looked at what was our strategy, what behaviors do we need to have to support that strategy. It's all about being a high performance culture right now. And then we created development that really supports that. And the development doesn't just stop at course completion, um, or, checking the box that I've done training. It really is, their leaders are talking to them about what it means to be a people leader. They're following up with them. And then we're also sharing with their teams, this is what I'm doing as a new leader. This is what I'm really working on. So I need feedback. And that's being tracked across the whole organization. And I guess the final aspect I would say is what measures matters. So that's the other aspect, is that it's not just lip service, but we're also, we've described success measures, we're tracking things. There's dashboards that we've created to keep a pulse on where are we really at and where do we still have room for improvement. And again, just being a lot more transparent about that across the board. So starts with that very aligned strategy, and then really communicating that out and having very clear expectations. And then all your development supports that.
I will say one thing, and then I'll hand over to everyone else. Jennifer, what did you decide on what some of those expectations are? You know, you mentioned what does it mean to be a leader within the organization? What were some of those things that surfaced that now when people talk about it, that everyone's aligned on?
Yeah. So the first thing we've talked about, so one of the things we created as part of the strategy were these 6 how-tos. So these are 6 behaviors that bring our strategy to life. One of the first behaviors is I need to own it. So I am accountable not just for the work that I'm assigned, but I'm accountable for the outcomes. And so all of our leaders and employees should be able to describe what that actually looks like in terms of owning it. We're also talking a lot about strategic alignment. So is the work that I'm doing really supporting the strategy? Am I saying yes to the right things and no to those things that would distract me from being able to help make progress towards our goals? Those are just a couple that are on our radar right now.
Love it. Emily, jump in. I can see you waiting to jump in, Emily. Go on, go for it. I know you was waiting for everyone else, but go on.
Thanks, Chris. So Jennifer, I love what you said about how you're doing this strategic alignment. And I think what sometimes trips people up then when they're doing that is when the rewards don't necessarily match the behaviors that have been defined. So, you tell me the behaviors, I learn the behaviors. And one of the things we find that managers tell us then is, well, that's great. I want to do all those behaviors. I would like to do that, except that my job is getting in the way. And so being able to do both of those things in this place where managers are telling us they're being asked to do more with less every single day, ensuring that all of those behaviors are connected to the things that they're measured on outside of those behaviors. So the productivity measures, the store performance, wherever you're working.
Yeah, great question, and absolutely a pain point that we've had to work through. Because you're right on. Our managers are, they've got more people reporting to them. They're not just a coach, but they're the player too. So they're having to balance that. So that's one of the things that we really aim to look at is how do we right size that job and the expectation of their job, especially if our primary expectation of them is that they're holding their teams accountable, they're developing their people. That if that's where we want to focus, then some of the other stuff that they're doing really has to go. So again, it came back to that idea of being strategic alignment, and are you saying yes to the right things and no to those things that don't really align to the work, and are you really making sure that the right people are doing the work? I know even for me, I'm tempted to get in there and do things myself instead of enabling my team. So one of the big things that we talked about is how do you, with true enablement and empowerment, it's getting decision making into to the right people. Like I don't need to be the bottleneck for everything, and so you don't necessarily need to send all of your work to me to approve. How do I make sure that I'm empowering my team to make those decisions that they absolutely can make on their own? And that's a big conversation that we're having with our leaders today, because I would say while we haven't always been like top down in terms of the strategic alignment, one thing we have been good at is having more top down management, where our leaders have been truly some of the bottlenecks for work getting done. And so we've really talked about getting building the psychological safety and trust and empowerment of our team to be able to make the decisions that they absolutely can make.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that's been said. I think there's one thing in it for me. If you want real alignment, there's nothing that does that better than creating commonality of goals, right? So I think if you really want everybody pulling in the same direction, give everybody the same objective, or at least a subset of objectives, and you suddenly quickly see how aligned everybody gets and how much more ruthlessly people start prioritizing. So to everything that you've just said, I think that's one of, for me, the key enablers of getting management pulling in the same direction behind a North Star that's really going to incentivize everybody to perform consistently.
Yeah, you're right on, Lee. In fact, that is after we did the alignment around what performance expectations were for last year, we set about setting our goals. And traditionally, we set our goals in February and then have them all locked into the system in March. This year, we started that process in February, and honestly, we just locked them in May. And that's because we did exactly what you said. So right now, not only does my team, so I'm part of corporate training, my team's goals align to, we have our customer service centers. Our goals are the same because we support them as one of our customers. I work with HR. Our goals are the same. And it all lines up across the enterprise. We did a view. In fact, our CEO actually looked at everybody's goals this year to really make sure that they aligned. And so it was a challenging process because we've never done it like this before. But that is, and again, that's back to what's measured matters. That's what our goals are. So now that we're all aligned, it's going to be that much easier to prioritize appropriately.
Yeah, the only distinction I'd make is I think I've seen some organization cascade goals really effectively. So we all think we're operating now in service of the top, corporate objectives, but strategies do pivot, and objectives can pivot even mid-year. So if everybody has goals that are somewhat aligned at the beginning of the year, and then there's a pivot, it can be difficult to realign everybody. If you do have the same shared goal, and that goal changes, everybody's on a new path together. Yep. So it's just what's the break in having people move to productivity if you're shifting everybody's goals versus the same goal for everybody.
Yep, right on.
Maddie, I'm going to come over to you because you've been very quiet over there.
I'm happy to speak up.
One of the goals of HR, and it's also a responsibility of the whole business, but HR kind of leads the way, is nurturing a work environment that supports the growth of our mid-level managers. Could you share how you're doing that in the organization?
Yes, actually, it was great to hear from Jennifer. Similar stuff happening for us at Fiskars Group. And my biggest recommendation before jumping in with the solution, figure out what are you really trying to solve? What's the problem? So yes, we want to create that environment where our mid-level managers can grow, but for us, similar expectations, like what I was hearing from Jennifer, we want them also to grow their teams and grow the business. So once we kind of have that in mind, and we also look to that demographic, we can definitely see there's a drop off in engagement when we think of like our senior leaders and our mid-level managers, and particularly around strategy. So a little bit different than the journey from Jennifer's perspective. We actually see that from that senior level down to the mid-level manager, there's a big drop off on how do we achieve this. And so when we've created our leadership program, which also has behaviors that are driving our strategy, so I don't know, it feels good when you're seeing some of that alignment across the HR community. We've really built it in this way that we can support the leaders, give them clarity, make it really, crystal clear on what is the expectation, and then wrap those behaviors around the strategy. We actually call the program Navigator. So like a compass to help you navigate those situations as a mid-level manager. And we've had an organization that we've tried to simplify and give that accountability, take out layers where it was not helpful. But then often that means that our mid-level managers are reporting to very, very senior people that are very strategic and long-term. And then they're leading teams that are quite junior. So the disparity and gap that they need to branch to be successful is huge. And so I think that's been an important factor for us in developing this work environment and leadership program that leaders can grow in and grow their teams and grow the business in. And I think the other piece that's been really helpful and listening to the leaders' feedback is keeping the cohorts rather small. That's something I think I can add to what Jennifer was speaking about, their program, is that having those small cohorts, different backgrounds, different functions, markets across the world, then it gives leaders that opportunity to go connect, find support, learn from each other, and then bring it back into their teams. And then we've even implemented like accountability buddies, because we've actually had a hard time, I would say, with those behaviors, taking it from that senior level and then implementing it down, like trickling that down into the organization. And this has been really effective, because I think then it comes to like what Lee was saying, people feel like we're all behind the same mission. We're all working in the same direction. And I have a team behind me who I can rely on.
One thing I'd love to add to that, and this is something that I've observed just being an HR practitioner, is that the development and the growth of everyone, let alone a manager, is so personalized. It's so subjective, right? And it's really hard to just develop a program that will support the entire organization. And so one of the things that we sometimes struggle with and we try to support is provide what that's going to look like for the individual. And so we've created assessments to really uncover what that may be for a specific individual. So it could be assessments that would show that this individual is actually more of a technical leader versus a people manager, right? This is something that is prevalent in any scientific organization, where someone who's really, really good at their technical job has this leadership position, but in reality, they may not have the leadership skill sets to lead a team, right? And if they take the assessment, they would know that, and maybe they don't even want that people leadership position in the first place, right? So being able to uncover and define what growth and development looks like for each individual has become really, really important, because there's this old notion of growth means promotion, upward movement, etc., right? But that's not going to look the same in the work of the future, or in fact work of the work of now. So that's a lot of what we try to support in HR and in HR analytics in general.
I think the interesting thing is you could create amazing academies, platforms for growth, programs, whatever it is you do. You have to try and foster a culture where growth and engagement is celebrated, is seen as a success point. And then you have to create the conditions and environment where you're creating space for people to indulge themselves in that, because we know it's easily the first thing that gets deprioritized. There are some easy ways of doing it. I remember at IBM, we had what was called Think 40, where there was an investment of 40 hours every single year for every employee. And it was far from frowned upon if people used their 40 hours of working to invest in themselves. In fact, we championed people who got to 100 hours. They were seen as super learners. And at Halion, every single month, we have a day which is Global No Meeting Day. And that's sort of the space where we say this is a great time to go and network, to take that coaching that you haven't been able to find time for, just to invest in some development that you need to do. So I think it's, how do we create amazing content and amazing programs? How do we create the space for people to take that up?
Yeah, equally to add on to that, I think be vigilant in your, especially mid-level managers, experience when it comes to the administration tasks that they're working with. That's something that we have we're continually trying to reduce the amount of admin type process tasks that are heavy and it's just energy draining. And it's of course not the kind of value adding work that we wish for them to focus their time with. I love the no meeting concept.
Yeah, it's always
Let's
a good
normalize a no meeting day.
I think we should all do that. Yeah.
I love what you said about the individualized growth and development but also making it something that works for the full organization. When we talked with managers, we did a study and about 3 times as many managers said they would prefer coaching to more training, which to me speaks to that idea of generalized knowledge sharing versus individualized, personalized learning that managers can do. So how can we create, I'd love to think through how you're creating those individualized coaching programs that exist at scale across an organization, because obviously you can't sit next to every manager all day, but providing them with the right kind of data and feedback from the things you're learning through those assessments, through the sentiment of their employees or the sentiment of their peers and leaders, to understand what are those hidden potential places and what are those places where they may overestimate their own skills, and then how to begin to personalize that through those academies, Lee, like you were saying, where people can feel very personalized in their learning.
Yeah, and then with the personalization piece as well, a lot of organizations I've seen create and curate amazing content. You know, academies full of learning, self-serve, knock yourself out. But actually, there's something where you want to push certain content and a level of discomfort on managers as well. You know, some of Maddie was talking about cohort based. Some of the best learning programs I've ever been on were the most uncomfortable because I was part of a cohort and I was taken way outside of my comfort zone. But you know what? I grew the most as a result of it. So I think we need to strike the balance of, you know, self-serve buffet with here's some real rigor that we need to put you through to help you on your journey.
And that data through those assessments is going to help us know where best to push people, right? Because I may not be aware of the place that I'm going to feel the most discomfort, or maybe I'm aware and that's why I avoid it. But if my manager, if my leaders can help me be aware of the places where I need to lean into discomfort, because the feedback suggests that those are places where I could use some growth, I think are excellent.
That's why some really rudimentary tools like a 360 is great, because half the time it's about just holding up the mirror and saying, this is how you're experienced, right? And then how do we bridge some of the gaps with these programs?
It's definitely within those uncomfortable moments that we learn the most, right, about each other. But also in those cohorts, there's also an element of, oh, I'm not the only one having this challenge. I'm not alone, right? Because it sometimes can be pretty lonely as well, right? Whereas when you get together with a cohort of other managers, you're like, it's not just me. There's other people having the same challenge, and we can help each other and feel supported. And you have people from different departments, different parts of the organization, even people from across the world that you can then also build that network and collaboration with, which can lead to innovation and many other elements as well that can help the organization. Had a question in the chat for yourself, Emily. So it's very specific, but I'm going to ask it because they've asked it 3 times. They said, does Perceptics allow for mid-level management goal assessment analysis? Hopefully you know more of what that means than me.
Sorry, goal assessment analysis is...
Does Perceptics allow for mid-level management goal assessment analysis? It's a very specific question. I just wanted to throw it to you because it's been asked quite a few times in the chat.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure what is meant by goal assessment analysis, but certainly, you know, we do offer a 360 assessment. We can get into setting those specific goals within our platform, or, you know, utilize platforms that people have. What we really will then do is be able to come alongside you with the creation and helping with some of those coaching bits through, you know, use of AI and best practice suggestion plans. But
no worries.
I'm not sure. I hope I answered that question because I'm not sure what goal assessment analysis is.
Kevin, don't worry. We'll connect with you with someone in the team. It's all right. So no worries. In terms on that point though, Emily, in terms of tools and techniques, could you talk about some of the tools that you're when you're working with mid-level managers, some of the tools and techniques that you're using to help empower them to enhance their productivity, but also allow them to help innovate within their teams?
Yeah, you know, for me, and this just comes from really the research and analytics background that I live in, I always go to the data first. So for me, one of the most important tools is access to great data. Sometimes what that has created is access to too much great data, and we need to help specifically mid-level managers who I think have so many things on their plate already, as we've discussed, hone in on what are the most relevant pieces of data for them and the ones that they can act on most effectively. So, you know, as we lean into using tools like a 360 assessment, understanding sentiment of your teams, beginning to crowdsource ideas and helping to facilitate and teach managers the skills that they need to facilitate with their teams, to hear back that feedback and be able to implement it. That's where it always begins for me. And then we can, you know, open it up to what are the great things that L&D folks have created out in the world that are going to help us lean into that discomfort and really push that growth. It's exciting to think about the technology advancements that are going to be able to pick out those pieces of data that have been most impactful for a variety of managers and serve those up more easily than I think, you know, often traditional and more rudimentary 360 approaches have said, here's a big report, read it and figure out what you're supposed to do next. But instead, if we can get better at scale at telling managers what we think they ought to do next, or giving them a couple of choices, I think we're going to be better off.
I just want to add to that, Emily. I absolutely agree, and data and analytics is something that I've been really passionate about. But I think to that end of being able to make informed decisions on what's next, right? What is the data telling us to do? Connecting that to the action item, right? Being able to communicate to our organization that we are doing this because we heard you is just as important, because there are times when individuals would take the change and they really wouldn't be able to tie it to the fact that this was the kind of feedback that we're receiving from you, or we're doing this because this is something that you told us that you wanted, right? And being able to kind of tie that together is important for direct reports to understand, and it also allows them to know that we are listening. These tools and these assessments are tools for you to provide feedback, and that's one way for us to continuously change the way we work. We're listening to you. This is one way for you to provide us with information how you can innovate faster and better, and so continue to provide us that feedback.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. There's nothing worse when you see all of these surveys and people take the time to give feedback and then you just don't hear anything back whatsoever. I'd rather, and I think the most successful companies I interview and speak to, they even communicate back what they're not going to do. So they say, they're really good at saying, hey, we hear you. This is where we're going to, prioritize time and energy. And this is kind of what we're doing. But by the way, we are actually not going to do those things as well. And it creates sort of a level of trust that your voice is actually truly heard. And obviously they do it on a regular basis through multiple channels as well. I think it's important, not just one channel. It could be at their town halls. It can be managers doing it in team meetings with their own team. There's multiple channels that you also have to communicate that through. And when you do deliver on one of those things, also celebrate it as well, and create some marketing and some campaigns around that. It needs to be something that people remember as well. So yeah, it's a really important point you just made. All right, Lee, we're coming to you next.
Sorry, Chris, one thing I want to add and then we can move on, because I agree with so much and great information from the whole panel. I also want to say some grassroots non-technology tools can be really helpful for supporting with productivity as well. We identified, for example, that people felt super overwhelmed with, they knew what the workload was, but they were struggling with prioritization. And at such a level that, you can't go out and sit with each one of them and help them through that prioritization. So just giving them a simple tool to help organize their workload, have a conversation with their manager, identify, what's the issue here? Is it that I need to reduce the workload, delegate the workload, or do I need to change something to become prepared for this workload? That has been really effective. And I mean, that's not, anything fancy or bells and whistles. It involved some level of identifying that in our engagement survey, but then executing that was very, old school. Still with a slide, but other than that, very straightforward. Don't forget to look for the simple fixes as well.
Yeah, I'd build on that, Maddie, and say I agree. The amount of times I've used something as rudimentary as like the Eisenhower matrix to say,
exactly.
are you really channeling incoming, tasks and priorities into, whether or not you should be focused on them now, deferring and deleting them, or delegating them. Just use a simple, important versus urgent sort of methodology. And the amount of times leaders have come back to me and said, "Oh my gosh, mind blowing!" It's not rocket science, but it's a model that somebody can subscribe to and use with great simplicity. So yeah, really effective.
Definitely important. Lee, I was going to ask you, what are some of the ways that you're helping coach mid-level managers to use the organizational resources they have more effectively, but also better manage their own personal development and their leadership? Because it's a tough role. Like you're delivering as a sole contributor, you're leading a team. Where do I have space for Chris? to actually take care of my own coaching and own development, right? We're asking a lot of our managers.
Yeah, and it's only getting worse, right? I think there's so much data out there, but I think Gallup in their workforce study last year said that 70% of team engagement comes directly from the manager. Conflicting studies say that up to nearly 50% of managers are feeling burnt out. So it's clearly everywhere, and it's how do we, as I said earlier, create that space for people. I think there's a coaching aspect, and I'll come to that in a second, which was your question. But I think before you even get there, you have to create value in the content and the resources that you're trying to have them adopt, right? And so often, by that, what I mean is, Jennifer was talking very eloquently earlier around strategic alignment and a strategy, that North Star. A lot of organizations that I've seen who are just pushing content out, as great as it may be, it's very fragmented. It's not connected to a strategy. It's not clear how this is going to help me operate in service of something. So I think being really intentional about what is our leadership philosophy, how does that bring the outside in and sort of merge what's occurring in terms of the evolving requirements of a mid-level manager with our own organizational needs, and what are we trying to solve for as an organization? Some, it may be speed and agility. Some organizations through leadership might want to unlock creativity or innovation. So create your leadership standards, your principles, or whatever your framework is for that, and ensure that people understand when we're trying to coach them or have them adopt certain things, how does it align to that in the first place? And I think the final piece about creating meaningful content and resources is having them co-create it to some degree with you. We've spoken about great assessments and great programs. Often we hear the need, we build something, and then we expect people to take it up. And actually, there's a big step in between of ensuring that they come on that journey and co-create and input and test with us before we just go and deploy something and expect everybody to take it up. But I think in terms of coaching, we've already spoken about the importance of data and analytics. I think just really talking to some of the numbers can make a really big difference in getting people taking up some of these resources, these initiatives, and buying in. I think as well, just the importance of helping mid-level managers understand the impact that some of these resources would have for their teams. Really will help them lean in. If I think about, we talked about something earlier, simple about data, but if we apply that to a real life case study of salary, salary cycles are a really big thing to manage with teams, and they can create great discontent as well as great opportunity for people. Just plugging in some logical data that incorporates performance metrics and past pay rises and inflation and everything else is so much more of a meaningful viewpoint for a manager now to take. But often they're sort of flying blind in those sort of circumstances. So it's, where do we not overload with data? Where do we create great data and just even a few instances that's going to help somebody make a better decision or a better impact on their teams? And I'd say there's a lot that we need to do to focus on unlocking collaboration. So if you look at a lot of the statistics around even sentiment in job descriptions, I think the words around collaboration have crept up 30% in the last decade, whereas things like supervisor and control, these terminologies are reducing by a quarter over the last decade in parallel. So it's how do we make sure that we're bringing that into what we're trying to teach and get from our leaders who are, largely now managing distributed workforces a lot more than we would have in the past. So I think there's a lot that we can do. My most powerful one that I love is just running retrospectives. I think in terms of coaching one-to-one with managers is role-playing, replaying scenarios that they've encountered, trying to bring in some empathy, some understanding, and then just really creating an action plan based off of that as to how, that scenario might be played out differently in the future.
You mentioned in there something I want to double click on. You mentioned burnout, and you which is a big issue. Kenny, I'd love to hear from you in terms of how are you helping your mid-level managers manage their stress? and I know it's a bit, it's one we don't talk about enough. It's interesting. As a leader, I'm kind of responsible for in some ways of the well-being of my team, whilst trying to take care of my own personal well-being at the same time. That's something that I think we saw in the pandemic, which was something that came up, and it was almost a silver lining in a strange way of shining the spotlight on well-being during that time. But I don't see us, I feel like we're reversing a little bit back to our old ways. If anything, it's getting worse from what I'm seeing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I do keep saying that was one of the silver linings of the pandemic. If there was anything that we learned from 2020 was, was the fact that it finally sheds a light on the fact that we are all overworked and we're all burnt out. But in terms of how we can help our managers deal with stress, I would use the same messages that the panel has mentioned already. So first one, I would say prioritization. There is never enough time in the day to do everything that we want to do. And so we need to be able to take the list of to-dos and be able to prioritize and understand what is going to make the most impact for our organization and what is not going to make as much impact, and put that in the backlog. And it doesn't feel comfortable putting things in the backlog and saying no to our stakeholders, but it's going to have to be something that we learn how to do. And to that end as well, the second thing is communication, right? Once we know what those priorities are, we need to cascade it down, because our people learn from what they see in our managers. And personally, I have a problem with work-life balance, but I never have an issue telling my team to disconnect whenever they go on vacation. But whenever they get an email from me on a weekend, you better believe somebody in my team is going to look at that, right? And that's kind of hypocritical of me. So it doesn't send the right message. And so being able to communicate and act the way that you're preaching is so important. And being able to communicate what your expectations are is just as important. And then the third one is really setting that boundaries. I've been in a company, a really great company that has these annual goal building, strategy building season. And part of what they started doing during the pandemic is not only will they talk to their organization about their priorities and what they want to accomplish for the year, but they also talk about what they're not going to do. So to your point earlier, Chris, they're anti what they call it OGSM, and OGSM it stands for like organizational something strategy or something. I can't even remember. It was a while back. But anyway, what it essentially stands for is that it's the list of things that are not as important for the organization. So if an individual were to have conflicting tasks, they can then be able to feel comfortable not to do a task, because they know, and it's coming from the top, that it's not a priority for the organization, right? It's that permission that all of us are looking for. But instead of us feeling like we can't say no to our stakeholders, it's our leaders telling us we're not going to do it. And that's the overarching and umbrella permission that we need to say no to a task that we feel like we have to do. So those I think those three things I think are going to be critical in helping us really establish that work-life balance. But again, it's something that I'm still learning. So if you guys have any other tips for me, I'm all ears.
I just think there's something in micro actions, the consistency and volume of the small moments that make an impact. Last night, I had a call with one of my team members and a few of our clients, and it was 5:30. We wrapped up the call, and I said instantly, "Quick debrief." And the response I got back was, "Actually, I'm tired. Been a long day. I'm going to go play football with my two boys." I thought, what a great response. That's a win. I'll chalk that up as a win, to have the comfort and the confidence in our culture to be able to do that. And I think that's not a me thing. That's our organization, day in, day out, gives people permission to live and put their lives first, not just live them, but put them first. And that takes everybody in your organization to build that culture.
I would ride on that comment as well. Teaching people and instilling a culture where people feel comfortable to deliver clear, kind feedback. I know that seems kind of far off, but it helps, especially at those lower levels as you go down into an organization, that people do feel empowered to say something like, "I'm actually going to go kick the soccer ball around," versus, yeah, of course, you're my manager, I'm going to stay on longer. Or if you see the bubble on the weekend and you're team member reaches out to you and says, hey, what are you doing online? Like, I love seeing things like that. I think it shows that you have a culture, a speak up culture, that people feel safe that way.
We're also talking about things that individuals can do to create that balance for themselves. I think organizationally, and particularly as a HR function, we push a lot out to organizations. There is something that we can do to really meet managers where they're at, right? So much, something basic. We want to create some learning content. We'll go and pull together 3 hours worth of incredible content. And then you have to sit now and do, this learning for something that you may do once this year, and actually none of the rest of it's applicable until next year. Well, let's go and find a way to nudge and prompt in the moment so they're getting the help they need as and when they need it, and that we're not burdening them, trying to make them have that prioritization discussion internally around something that really isn't a priority for them.
Yeah, that happens a lot. I think everyone can relate to that one. Kearney, I was just thinking about your last comment, by the way. I had this conversation recently with the team. I was talking about well-being, and they said the exact same thing you said. Well, you don't do it, Chris. Right. So here am I encouraging the team to take their holidays, to not do calls at late at night, etc. And I'm like, we need to be examples of that as well. And I had a situation this week where there was an 8 p.m. call in my calendar, and I was like, no, I want to be there for bedtime. Like, I want to read a book to Robin tonight. Like, I don't want to be doing calls. And yes, it's an important call, but can it really wait? Does it really have to be done tonight? No, it doesn't. So we have to be super intentional about making those things happen, and like carving those moments out. So I'm like blocking my diary of all those times and making sure that you kind of need to create a system around those things. Otherwise, it won't just happen itself, especially when we have distributed teams. It's even more difficult to make that happen when people are in different time zones, etc. It can be, and even if you think you're that person that says, well, it says in my email signature that you don't have to get back to me, they're still going to open it on the Saturday. You're fooling yourself if you think that a little thing at the end of your email is going to stop one of your employees from opening it and working a few hours on a Sunday as well. So we have to be really intentional about all of those things. But I'm glad we added this part to the conversation, because I think it's super important as well. I mean, we got to wrap up. I knew we wouldn't get through all of the questions as well. But before I let everyone go, we covered a lot during the conversation, and just wanted to ask everyone what would be your sort of parting piece of advice, and then we'll say goodbye. Emily, I'm going to pick on you first.
Yeah, I think for me, it still comes back to how do we prioritize using information that we have, which in many cases is data. So use that data to help create those priorities for your manager's development.
Love it. Super concise. Lee?
Not something that we spoke about a lot, but I'd say focus on coaching around trust. I think that is the bedrock for everything we're asking people to lean into to develop themselves, everything else. Find a model that works really well for you organizationally, and really focus on amplifying trust and enablement around trust with leaders. Love it.
Love it. Jennifer?
I'm going to click in on something Lee said. We got a lot of our leaders involved in helping create the content for leaders, and that made a big difference. Natural champions, and there was something, having that content come from somebody who lives it, breathes it every day, and not just me, which yes, I try to live it, breathe it too, but it just went so much further. So that I really love that idea, and I'm going to keep doing that.
Yeah. Maddie?
Yeah, I would actually have said similarly, create communities for your mid-level managers. They're tired, make sure that they have good connections within the organization. And actually something that we spoke about a lot, cut the noise out for them, think about their experience, allow them the space to focus on the things that matter. And then it's great if you then have that data to back it up, but create that work environment and container where they can actually focus and find space for the value driving activities.
Love that. Last but not least, Kearney?
Yeah, and this is something we've talked about, but really sitting down and understanding our priorities, what we will do and what we won't do, is just as important, because I think if we get a handle on what those are and we're able to communicate that and cascade that to our organization, we're a better organization for it. It'll it'll be a good task, not just for our mid-level managers, but for everyone in our team. It'll help with stress, with burnout, with, you know, every you know, concept of well-being that you can think of. So my encouragement is to really just go through your priorities, understand what you want to do for the upcoming year, and be intentional about talking about what you won't do, as it is just as important.
Love that. Love that. Well, that's a wrap, everyone. Thanks so much for everyone who just tuned in from all over the world. A big thank you to all of our panelists for sharing their experience and joining us as well. A special thank you to our friends at Perceptics for helping us bring this panel together. Directly beneath this video, there's a giant, huge button right in front of you. If you click on that, you actually can download their guide for management behaviors, which is very relevant to what we just spoke about as well. So make sure you take a second to download that. Great research and insights there. Also, as many of you know, 3 weeks ago, we actually launched the world's first AI co-pilot for HR. And one of the goals of that is to help leaders and managers get instant answers to their questions. So, for example, you'll be able to actually ask questions using the co-pilot to this exact panel to get the answer that you need using the co-pilot. One of our goals was, it's great that we have all of this information, and we've discussed this actually during the panel, but how do we get the answers that we need that meet us where we are in the flow of work? So if you click the link in the chat, you can start using that for free. So go ahead and do that. Apart from that, wherever you are in the world, thank you for tuning in, joining us, and we wish you all the best until we next speak. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.